The Gymnast by Gary Soto. For 3 days of my 11th summer, I listened to my mother yap about my cousin Isaac, who was taking gymnastics. She was proud of him. She said one evening at the stove, as she pounded a round steak into carne asada and crushed a heap of beans into refritos. I was jealous because I had watched my share of wide world of sports and knew that people admired an athlete who would somersault without hurting himself. I pushed aside my solitary game of Chinese checkers and spent a few minutes rolling around the backyard until I was dizzy and itchy with grass. That Saturday, I went to Isaac's house where I ate plums and sat under an aluminum arbor watching my cousin, dressed in gymnastic shorts and top, do spindly cartwheels and backflips in his backyard while he instructed. This is the correct way. He breathed in the grassy air, leaped and came up smiling, the straightest teeth in the world. I followed him to the front lawn. When a car passed, he did a backflip and looked out the side of his eyes to see if any of the passengers were looking. Some pointed while others looked ahead dully at the road. I spent a few minutes rolling around the backyard until I was dizzy and itchy with grass. But when I did a cartwheel, the shoes flew off along with the tape. My cousin was a show-off, but I figured he was allowed the limelight before one appreciative dog who had come over to look. I envied him in his cloth gymnast shoes. I liked the way they looked, slim, black, and cool. They seemed special, something I could never slip onto my feet. I ate the plums and watched him until he was sweaty and out of breath. When he was finished, I begged him to let me wear his cloth shoes. Drops of sweat fell at his feet. He looked at me with disdain, ran a yellow towel across his face, and patted his neck dry. He tore the white tape from his wrist. I liked the tape as well and tried to paste it around my wrist. He washed off his hands. I asked him about the white powder, and he said it kept his hands dry. I asked him why he needed dry hands to do cartwheels and backflips. He said that all gymnasts kept their hands dry, then drank from a bottle of greenish water he said was filled with nutrients. I asked him again if I could wear his shoes. He slipped them off and said, "Okay, just for a while." The shoes were loose, but I liked them. I went to the front yard with my wrists dripping tape and my hands white as gloves. I smiled slyly and thought I looked neat, but when I did a cartwheel, the shoes flew off, along with the tape, and my cousin yelled and stomped the grass. I was glad to get home. I was jealous and miserable, but the next day I found a pair of old vinyl slippers in the closet that were sort of like gymnastic shoes. I pushed my feet into them, tugging and wincing because they were too small. I took a few steps, admiring my feet, which looked like bloated water balloons, and went outside to do cartwheels on the front lawn. A friend skidded to a stop on his bike, one cheek fat with sunflower seeds, his mouth churned to a stop. He asked why I was wearing slippers on a hot day. I made a face at him and said that they were gymnastic shoes, not slippers. He watched me do cartwheels for a while, then rode away doing a wheelie. I returned inside. I looked for tape to wrap my wrist, but could find only circle bandages in the medicine cabinet. I dipped my hands in flour to keep them dry and went back outside to do cartwheels, and finally, after much hesitation, a backflip that nearly cost me my life when I landed on my head. I crawled to the shade, stars of pain pulsating in my shoulder and neck. My brother glided by on his bike, smooth as a kite. He stared at me and asked why I was wearing slippers. I didn't answer him. My neck still hurt. He asked about the flour on my hands, and I told him to leave me alone. I turned on the hose and drank cool water. My toes cooled on the summery grass. And finally, after much hesitation, a backflip that nearly cost me my life. I walked to Roman playground where I played Chinese checkers and was asked a dozen times why I was wearing slippers. I'm taking gymnastics. I lied, and these are the kind of shoes you wear. When one kid asked why I had white powder on my hands and in my hair, I gave up on Chinese checkers and returned home, my feet throbbing. But before I went inside, I took off my slippers. My toes cooled on the summery grass. I ran a garden hose on my feet and bluish ankles, and a chill ran up my back. Dinner was a 10-minute affair of Paranka like eating and 30 minutes of washing dishes. Once finished, I returned to the backyard where I again stuffed my feet into the slippers and did cartwheels by the dizzy dozens. After a while, they were easy. I had to move on. I sucked in the summer air along with the smoke of a faraway barbecue and tried a backflip. I landed on my neck again. This time I saw an orange burst behind my eyes. I lay on the grass, tired and sweaty, my feet squeezed in the vise of cruel slippers. I watched the dust settle and the first stars, pinpoints of unfortunate light, tangled in telephone wires. I ate a plum and pictured my cousin, who was probably cartwheeling to the audience of one sleeping dog. Reader response, open for discussion. The narrator of The Gymnast says, I was jealous and miserable. Why was he jealous? What did his jealousy make him do? Do you know anyone who has had an experience like this? What was the outcome? Number one, Gary Soto has taken an incident from his childhood and packed it with sensory details to bring it to life. Find details that tell how things looked and sounded and felt. Do these details bring the incident to life? Explain. Number two, young Gary draws the conclusion that his cousin Isaac is a show off. Find details from the selection that support this conclusion. Number three, find passages that show how Gary looks in his gymnastics outfit and how his cousin looks. Discuss how the visual details help make them two very different people. Number four, somersault and cartwheels are names for gymnastic feats. What other words from the words to know list would go into a web with gymnast at the center? Look back and write. The dog in the gymnast acts as an audience. Find the dog on pages 493 and 497. How does the dog as audience change? And what does the change tell you about the gymnast? Write your answer. Right now, descriptive writing. Prompt. In The Gymnast, a boy learns that he can't be anybody but himself. Think about an important lesson you have learned. Now write a description of the lesson and how you learned it. All about gymnastics. After reading Gary Soto's The Gymnast, Alice decides she might want to do gymnastics, so she goes to an online reference website. This site has 4 reference sources: an atlas, almanac, dictionary, and encyclopedia. When Alice types the keyword gymnastics into the search engine and clicks on Go, the site gives her a list of results that begins like this. Gymnastics. Gymnastics, exercise for the balanced development of the body. Gymnastics. When complete in the vault, floor exercises, balance beam, and uneven parallel bars, as well as in rhythmic gymnastics and on the trampoline. Vault. In gymnastics, to leap over a vaulting or pommel horse, using the hands for pushing off. This concludes the story, The Gymnast. Thank you for listening.